Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today, and welcome to Innovating in Challenging Times, the first of our Disrupt and Diversify series, a three-part series aiming to help you shape your growth strategies and stay ahead of the curve in 2021. My name is Emma Jordan, and I'm a marketing lead at staffing and recruiting firm Motion Recruitment, the founder and creator of Tech in Motion Events, our international tech event series. For those of you who are new to the community, Tech in Motion is a community-driven event series with a goal to bring the tech community together, share ideas, and inspire one another. So 2020 has really made it evident that innovation is one of the best tools for addressing and overcoming the challenges we face as leaders. Today, we have the privilege to dive into how two companies and 2020 Timmy Award winners, Ro and Valqari, have remained resilient and pivoted their growth strategies to emerge even stronger than before. As this year comes to a close, and we all begin to consider our strategies for 2021, we know this will be an incredibly timely discussion. We hope that the insights and stories provided here by these incredible tech leaders will inspire your own innovative directions. Stay tuned at the end of our webinar to hear more about parts 2 and 3 of this series that will be coming soon. With that, I just want to quickly go over a few housekeeping items so you know what to expect, and then turn it over to our moderator, Ben, to kick things off. First, you'll notice that all of you have joined this webinar in listen-only mode. Feel free to submit questions and comments in the chat box on your GoToWebinar panel, and we'll do our best to address them during the live Q&A session at the end. Today's webinar will also be available on demand after the live session ends, and you'll receive a link via email to view the video. So now on to our webinar content. I am so thrilled to introduce our moderator, Ben Novak. Ben represents emerging growth companies in the US and abroad in various industries, including technology and life sciences, as well as angel investors, private equity firms, and venture capital funds. He serves on the board of directors of the New Jersey Technology Council and on the advisory board of the William and Mary Business Law Review. Additionally, he routinely speaks at events like this one and conferences on a variety of topics related to technology, entrepreneurship, and investing. Outside of his role at Morgan Lewis, Ben is personally an active angel investor who invests primarily in East Coast-based seed stage technology companies. So Ben, I will let you take it over from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. Hey, everyone. Ben Novak here. Super stoked to be with you. Just want to start by giving a special thanks to Tech in Motion for organizing today's event, and specifically to our two speakers for joining us, two of our Timmy Award winners. So we have Ryan Walsh, co-founder and CEO of Valqari, and Chloe Pai, the chief of staff at Ro. So our goal is for this to be interactive conversation. I know the virtual environment makes that a little bit challenging, but our goal is to keep this conversation relevant to our participants and people in the audience. So please feel free to submit questions, and we're going to try to get through as many of them as possible. We're going to start with some intros, then go into kind of a fireside chat, and then end with some questions. But if you submit questions throughout, I'll do my best to try to integrate them into our conversation. So there should be a question function in your GoToWebinar setup, and there's also a chat function. So if you can't figure out the question feature, feel free just to throw them in the chat, and we'll try to scoop up as many as possible. So why don't I start by turning it over to you, Chloe? Would you mind talking a little bit about yourself and introducing you and your company to the group?
Yeah, of course. Ben, first things first, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. For everyone here, I'm Chloe Pai, just as Ben mentioned earlier, chief of staff at Ro. On a day-to-day basis, I partner with the CTO at Ro, as well as leads across engineering, product design, data, to really holistically think about how we grow and scale our tech team. And a little bit of color and background around me. I was part of the original founding team that had built and launched Roman before it was called Ro. We had launched in 2017, Halloween, actually, and it's been our 3-year anniversary that we recently passed. We've actually seen our team of 5 grow to a company of 300 plus. So it's been a truly incredible journey. And previous to Ro, I had the privilege of working alongside just really wonderful humans, incredible visionaries to entrepreneurs to build other telehealth startups from, all sorts of things, to corporate innovation projects with Arabella, a software development firm, as well as Prehype, a venture development firm. Just a little background around Row, because context is always good. Row is a patient-driven telehealth company. We've built a nationwide network of physicians and pharmacists to provide personalized, affordable, and accessible end-to-end healthcare experiences for all patients. And when I say end-to-end, I truly mean end-to-end. We've really spanned from online treatment to pairing patients to the right physicians, to delivery of medication, to even ongoing care. So it's a holistic ecosystem. And we currently power 3 digital clinics, a men's health vertical called Roman, a women's health vertical called Rory, and also a smoking cessation vertical called Zero. And we also have an online pharmacy, Row Pharmacy, where we offer generic medications for just $5 per month. And that's just little old me in Row.
Awesome, Chloe. If that doesn't spark some questions, I don't know what will, but I know we've had some pretty impressive growth, especially in recent years, and done particularly well on the financing front. So I expect we'll get some audience questions about raising capital and raising capital during this environment. So feel free to ask those questions, audience, and we'll toss those to you in a bit, Chloe. Ryan, over to you. Would you mind giving a little background on yourself and introducing your company, please?
Sure. I'm Ryan Walsh. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Valqari. We really focus on drone delivery infrastructure, putting that end and send point in place so there's secure, weatherproof, theft-proof, auditable chain of custody in any drone delivery network. So we partner with companies across the world to integrate with their solutions and create full end-to-end drone delivery.
Awesome. Another super exciting space where I think we'll have a lot of engagement. So to start off the conversation, why don't we talk about 2 topics, what I'll call 2020 and 2021. So obviously 2020 has been a year unlike any other year that we can recall here. Why don't I turn it over to you, Chloe? Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges and maybe the opportunities that this year presented for your company, and maybe added on to that some of the things that you as a company have done to take advantage of this unique year and kind of exploit the opportunities and defend against the threats of 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, it's a great question to just really, address, let's say, the elephant in the room, COVID-19. A short anecdote. I once had a mentor that said whenever my team or I was faced with challenges or problems, that challenges and problems are actually opportunities in disguise. And if anything, COVID-19 has really taught us that. What it taught us, and frankly taught anyone who's either been a patient or a provider in any circumstance, that now more than ever, telehealth can really serve as a complement to in-person care very effectively. And I just really want to drive that point here. Just telehealth is really like a complementary version to in-person care. And the pandemic has really forced patients to take that virtual first approach to healthcare when things just aren't, that easily accessible in the physical world. It also forced us at Row to, I would say, accelerate and investing smartly into teams and technologies that would help increase access to virtual care and find faster ways of delivering medication to meet every patient's need at such a critical time. And what we learned from that sort of investment is really investing back into that sort of end-to-end holistic ecosystem that I aforementioned earlier. It's really just building out that sort of vertical moat, if you will, between patients and in-person care, which again was harder to receive during COVID. And when looking to the future, because I know you alluded to 2021 and perhaps more, we really do see this trend continuing, having that sort of telehealth, that virtual first approach to healthcare, but having that complementary to physical in-person healthcare. And as we grow, I would imagine that we are continuing to build and invest in our platform that would empower patients and providers at the same time to receive treatment whenever and wherever, whether it's online or in person.
Awesome. In a second, Ryan, I'm going to turn the same question over to you, but fortunately, we already have some audience participation, Chloe, so maybe I'll throw out the first question to you. Obviously, this has been a really incredible year for a number of industries, digital health being one of them, telemedicine being a really hot area right now. The question relates specifically to how you navigated the state-specific regulations and whether you used someone or what resources you used to kind of navigate the state-specific regulatory issues. Obviously, throughout the pandemic, it's been a very tumultuous time from a legislative perspective. Laws are changing rapidly, regulations have been changing quickly. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what your company did to navigate that quickly evolving regulatory environment?
Absolutely. I think this has to go back down to how we are built at Roe, the sort of DNA that we have, right? At Roe, we work in multidisciplinary teams, and we've always prided ourselves with that. We have a very fantastic legal team on our side, very knowledgeable physicians, as well as a great network of pharmacists who work and partner with us at Roe. So it's been a part of the fabric, the DNA of Roe since the beginning of time, since 2017. So when we think about it, our first approach was never really about like whether or not we slap on a fancy package and just send out drugs. It's never about that. It's really just taking on that holistic healthcare approach, which means just like any sort of physical healthcare interaction, just like any other healthcare interaction, you have to really understand the legalities of every state and what you're navigating through. So to spare us from really jumping into details here, we've taken quite a lot of cautions and considerations to understanding the law of each state. Getting the right licensing for each state and making sure that we are compliant under whatever measures possible. And if we even find ourselves in any sort of like gray room, it's best to not address that sort of gray area in the sense of like, let's just go into it and figure it out, but rather making sure that we really understand what we're trying to address before going in. And that's the sort of measures that we generally take.
Awesome. I have lots of follow-up questions, and so do our audience. But let me first turn it over to Ryan and talk a little bit about what 2020 has brought for you in Valqari.
Sure. It's been quite a roller coaster year, to say the least. Right when COVID hit, we had an entire tranche of our seed round committed by one investor who ended up getting hit by COVID, not only physically, but financially as well. And so, we had to go out last minute and find some money, and we had very, very short runway to do it. It was a very trying time. I think I added a number of grays to my beard and got a lot of long sleepless nights, but we figured it out and we were able to get funding in. We just had to look in new places, and although we had to kind of start from scratch and kind of build a new network post COVID, we had just enough time to put the time into the relationships, and they liked the technology, and we were good, and then we started seeing a lot of the companies that were starting to pivot towards things like telehealth, like Chloe's saying, towards autonomous no-touch delivery. And, how do we kind of live in this world now that this is a thing? I mean, we've been lucky for so long that this hasn't hit humanity like this before, but this is not abnormal, right? So to have some of these systems in place, knowing what we know now and how detrimental it can be, it wouldn't be at the detriment to society or humanity, right? So we're just kind of awakening to this point. And so a lot of the economy is, and we're finding a lot of new growth and a lot of new interest from pretty much every sector right now, that this is how things are moving. So we're lucky to be in the upswing of this. A lot of companies aren't, but restaurants, for instance, we're seeing a move towards dark kitchens. We're seeing a move towards these kinds of things that make more sense in the new environment. So it's really just having that foresight to how do you adapt to this, and understanding that change is the only constant in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when this thing kicked off back in March, one of my clients called me and said, "Hey, Ben, this COVID-19 thing, this seems pretty significant. Is this going to impact your practice and your clients?" And I said, "Absolutely." And they said, "How?" And I said, "I have no idea yet." But I kind of re-ask myself that question every week, and kind of week after week, the answer keeps on changing in terms of how this has been impacting my tech startup clients and my investor clients and other companies that I've invested in. Really is a very dynamic environment with a lot going on, and I think both of you have some good stories to share. So Ryan, you brought up fundraising and some of the challenges of raising capital during this time. Maybe I'll turn it over to Chloe to talk a little bit about kind of your experience in raising capital. I know you've had you've raised, what is it, over 300 million you guys have raised to date? And maybe you could talk a little bit about your financing history and how that was impacted by COVID. And then maybe, Ryan, I could ask you to talk a little bit more about your experiences raising capital during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. We were very fortunate recently to raise a new round of capital, 200 million, which totals up to 376 million, I believe. And these sort of new flush of capital is actually coming from a group of very trusted and existing investors, which is truly incredible. It just shows that, you know, firstly, telehealth is something that people do want to invest in. It gives validity in the sort of space that we're in, and secondly, that people do trust Ro and the sort of mission that we're coming towards and always supporting, which is driving towards a patient-centric healthcare, as well as, you know, being every patient's first call. So in terms of investment, yeah, we've been very fortunate to see that new round of money come through, and it's largely been put towards you know, creating that vertical moat that I keep talking about in terms of technologies and finding good people, finding good partnerships to bring along the ride.
So I think you bring up a good point that some industries are doing great right now. I represent a number of companies that actually have the word COVID in their name, and I'll tell you, they're getting a lot more attention from investors than some of our other more traditional clients. You know, one of the other things that, you know, I know that I've talked to my angel group and some other investor clients about is kind of the importance of where you were in your financing cycle when COVID hit. We talk a lot about, you know, which companies are going to survive, which companies are going to thrive throughout this. And one of the things that we often talk about is those companies that just closed the $200 million round prior to COVID tend to be in a better situation than those that were just about to start a raise. But of course, once again, it kind of depends on your industry and how your company is impacted by COVID.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
After you, Chloe.
Oh no, I was just saying.
Please, Chloe. After you.
You make such a great point to keep it very succinct and clear that, like, yeah, it's an absolute privilege to be in the place that we are, and a lot of it is, you know, I think a lot of it is just understanding that healthcare needs that sort of special attention right now because of COVID in itself, and really finding ways to pivot into that sort of low touch economy, which I'm sure we'll be addressing very soon. So, but I would love to hear more of what Ryan has to say.
Awesome, Ryan. So Ryan, you talked a little bit about some of the challenges and that your investor sounds like negatively impacted by COVID, and also was hit with COVID herself. Would you mind maybe talking a little bit more about that and how you kind of pivoted and navigated that process?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we kind of dug deep and realized what we needed to get done, you know, kind of cut off the driftwood, so to speak, all that deadwood on top, and really buckled down. Excuse me, figured out, talked to a number of our customers and figured out what do they want, what are they looking for their applications, and tried to meet that as best we could with our development, and it led to a much bigger solution than we were looking at on that point of view, right? So we had to change some budgets, we had to go out and show these investors that we were meeting this customer fit and create those new relationships. I mean, it was a whole different investor pool post-COVID, you know, because like I said, that investor ended up, you know, on a ventilator. It wasn't good, and so it wasn't, you know, something we saw that was going to recover quickly, right? So, you know, we had to really dig deep into who was investing in this space, who was kind of waiting for this kind of downturn in the market and kind of had that hedge money on the side. And it turns out we were successful. I mean, radical transparency was really what served us well in that, from both the engineering and figuring out what we needed to build to be customer driven, and from an investor point of view, so they had that ability to trust us very early on and very quickly to understand what our vision was, what we were building, and how we were going to get there, right? I mean, that's really what every investor is looking for, is how have you taken the risk out of the equation, right? So we pretty much pulled all the curtains aside. Everybody saw everything, top down, bottom up, you know, you name it. And it really allowed us to grow rapidly and do what we needed to do. And we ended up getting a very significant strategic partner / investor. They ended up doing some large pilot projects with us, as well as investing in us. So, you know, it ended up being a good move on our part to really, you know, internally analyze what we could be doing better and what we were doing strong and continue to do.
I think that's great, and I like that you're already giving them some actionable insights for our audience members. I was recently serving on a panel, and one of the questions was, you know, what can people do right now to pitch better during COVID for the companies that are raising capital now? One of the things that I mentioned is basically don't ignore the elephant in the room. You have to address COVID, but at this point, it's more than addressing COVID, right? It's talking about your story pre-COVID. What did you build? Why did you build that? Assuming your company was around prior to March, what was your company and your story pre-COVID? How is that impacted in COVID, and how are you exploiting the opportunities of this environment? But also, critically important, the third prong is, what's your company look like post-COVID, right? And a surprising amount of the time when people are pitching me, they do not hit all three of those. And I think, you know, like you mentioned, the radical honesty, the transparency is particularly important. The pitches do not come across sincere if you're only pitching one of those three prongs. It's fine that you didn't anticipate COVID. The question is, okay, so you built something. How did you pivot and leverage that into the new market? What opportunities have you found? And not just how are you going to do well during COVID, but how are you going to do well beyond? So Chloe, we're getting a couple questions. It seems like people are very excited to hear more about your company and your product. So let me throw out one of them. So Matt asked, how does Ro's end-to-end patient ecosystem provide a strategic advantage versus some of your company's competitors? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and then maybe also we could kind of transition this into 2021. So as we transition from 2020 to 2021, you know, I don't expect any of you guys to have a crystal ball here and be able to tell us what next year holds, but I'll ask anyway. Why don't you give us some predictions as to, you know, what this next year will hold for you and your company, and maybe you could address Matt's specific question as well.
Sure. So to answer the first question, oh man, the age-old question about competitors and how do we think about them? Well, to be absolutely honest with you, having competitors, it's truly a fantastic thing. And how I see it is in two ways. Firstly, it legitimizes the space that you're in, and the sort of needs that users have. It truly means that we need to continuously invest in telehealth to address the problems that the modern healthcare system has. And secondly, it pushes you to innovate faster and better. It makes you really, really understand the sort of needs that the users have and looking forward, right? To have a lens into the future and really just try to predict what they really want. And for us at Ro, I find that we differentiate ourselves in a variety of ways, both in our products and the way we approach in building our teams. But I really want to fall back onto this idea of that sort of end-to-end healthcare ecosystem that I keep talking about, that vertical moat, and the intention of us bridging the gap between patients and in-person care. That's something that really differentiates us from our competitors. We truly think critically on the sort of end-to-end experience, from online treatment to finding patients, connecting them to the right doctors, to 2-day medication delivery, which, by the way, in itself is an operational conundrum for those who are in operations in the delivery space, to continuous follow-up and ongoing care. And I really just want to keep pushing on the second proposition here, that telehealth should always be a complement to in-person care. This is something that we learned in 2020 as a learning lesson, and I truly strongly believe that we're going to take this learning lesson and use it into our future, into 2021 and much further. It's not meant to supplant in-person care in any way. In fact, it can provide a great partnership over there. So a lot of it is investing our resources towards that sort of complete end-to-end healthcare experience, and we take on the complexities of healthcare on behalf of our patients. It's not just slapping on a new design, a new packaging. It's truly a wholesale reconsideration of how we can make healthcare more holistic, right? From those operational conundrums that I was just talking to you about. How do we make sure all medications delivered within a 2-day period, regardless of where people live, including healthcare deserts, which is most of the Midwest, to technical conundrums like how do we scale a system to treat multiple conditions and still have a very integrative experience for the end user. So that's my understanding of how we often see competitors. And in terms of the crystal ball piece, I feel like I did answer some of those questions or gave hinting to those questions, but it's really falling back to the idea of, firstly, telehealth, building out telehealth as a complementary sort of partnering service to in-person physical care. And also, secondly, finding ways to really build out that sort of holistic ecosystem.
Awesome. Ryan, I'm going to turn it back to you now. And I also love how every time you guys answer a question, I get 3 more questions here in the chat. I think a lot of people are interested in what you guys are doing here. So Ryan, on your company, one of the questions here, a bit more of a technical question, but if you wouldn't mind quickly addressing this. Kevin was wondering more about the weather tolerances for your drones and what they could operate in. So what type of wind speed, visibility, precipitation. Could you talk a little bit about that? And also gave you a shout out saying, I really admire your company tackling this challenge. Bravo.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, that's we actually don't build drones. So we build landing stations and infrastructure, and we have over a dozen different drone partners. And so what we look to do is, if a customer has a particular climate, we go in and we analyze it. We look at, what are the average wind speeds, what are the spikes, what are the different things that are going to affect the delivery, and we pick the best platform for the job. And so that way we're able to customize a lot of the networks right now to the solutions. Some of the larger drones can withstand 30, 35 mile an hour winds, right? I mean, they're getting pretty big. Weatherproofing on a drone, it's completely possible. You just got to seal off those electronics, right? So all of these things are being overcome by various people in the industry. Most of them are partners, so we can get past a lot of those things. But that's a great question. I do want to piggyback off of what Chloe was saying, though, because she really nailed it, right? 2020 opened our eyes to how do you keep a lot of these systems in place ongoing, right? People always ask me, are drones going to replace vehicle delivery from trucks, right? No, of course not. Right? What it does is provide another solution on top, because we already have a very choked healthcare system, a choked logistics trucking system, last mile delivery network, right? How do you give this some overflow, if anything, right? In a lot of cases, drones make more sense than vehicles. In a lot of cases, vehicles still make much more sense, right? And so it's providing that extra outlet so even more people can get care, right? And we see drone delivery as the next integration after telehealth. I mean, what these guys are doing over at Row is incredible, and I admire them, right? And we hope to be the next iteration in that healthcare, right? How do you get that 2-day delivery window down to less than 2 hours, right? How can we use drones to say, you just had your appointment, right? The drone's already been dispatched because the doctor's already connected with your pharmacy. You already said, yep, that sounds great. Your insurance is already clued in. And now the drone's already taking that to your house, right? That's a great example of where a truck doesn't make sense, because why send an entire truck out to deliver one tiny little jar of pills, right? So we're looking at drones to be the complementary physical component to everything Chloe's describing. So we see 2021 and beyond as a great integration and proving grounds for all of these things coming together and really having that sci-fi world where it's very beneficial for everybody.
So one of our participants has a specific question about whether either of you have anything going on in Africa, any current projects in Africa, or whether you plan on going into that market. One of the things I wanted to talk about was the low touch economy and the future of the low touch economy. So maybe we could kind of take this question a little more broadly. So not just what are you doing in Africa, or do you plan to exploit that market, but also, as one of the great opportunities that this year has brought us is the fact that it's pretty much just as easy to meet with someone 3,000 miles away as it is to meet with somebody 3 miles away. I know personally, in my own angel investment thesis, I tend to invest within at least a couple-hour drive. So I invest primarily in East Coast companies, but really the bulk of them tend to be in the Mid-Atlantic region. So I say I invest from Boston to DC, Pittsburgh to the ocean. And part of that is because I like the opportunity to be able to meet with my CEOs and break bread with them, share a beer. And previously that was in person, and now it's become virtual, right? I have, weekly, if not daily, beers with my CEOs. And it really doesn't matter whether they're sitting in their house in Manhattan or they're, on vacation in Tahiti. It's the same experience. Chloe, do you want to take this one first, and maybe I'll turn it over to Ryan?
Yeah, I'd love to actually. Just really on the low touch economy first. I feel like we kind of need to touch on that as a definition almost. And the sort of one caveat that I like to highlight here is that low touch is almost sometimes misinterpreted. Low touch doesn't necessarily mean low quality interactions with, your colleague or even with consumers. It does, however, mean less physical interaction, as we've seen in COVID, and I'm sure that's going to evolve more into the future. But we can always find ways to really understand the needs of our consumers and deepen our relationships with our end user, whether they're customer or patient or colleague. And again, like Ryan, I just want to say that I really truly see similarities between Ro and Valqari here, and I really admire what Valqari does, and essentially just redesigning the way we approach the delivery business model. And through drone delivery has really adapted to circumstances of COVID-19 and for the long haul, the low touch economy, by bridging the gap of very costly delivery methods currently through contactless delivery. And as for Ro, we're redesigning how patients interact with healthcare, regardless of where they are. And low-touch telehealth experience, again, doesn't necessarily mean the decimation of physical healthcare. It's meant to be a complement of experiences, and it's meant to be a moat between patients and their in-person care experience. And further, by investing in that sort of telehealth experience, we have the opportunity, every one of us, regardless of Ro or not, even our competitors, to make healthcare much more affordable and accessible and personalized, which should frankly always be the goal. When you think about it, healthcare is often seen as a luxury for many people, even though it shouldn't be, especially for those in healthcare deserts. And again, I just want to point to the Midwest here. So imagine being able to receive healthcare without traveling miles to get to the nearest in-network doctor. It's a huge game changer.
Right, Ryan, over to you.
I mean, one of the things that we have really been working on is exactly to respond to COVID-19. Now, granted, we would probably be, fully vaccinated by the time this is implemented through the FAA and everything, but having these systems in place for the future, right? If somebody ends up, getting on a telehealth appointment with their doctor, right? They say, yeah, you have symptoms. I can send a test to you by drone, right? You swab your cheek or your nose, right? You put it back in, a drone comes and picks it up, takes it directly to a lab, it's tested. And now we can have medicines and meals and supplies delivered to you autonomously whenever you need them, scheduled if you need them, and you never have to go out and have community spread, right? I mean, really providing this, no touch ability, right? Because you want to have all the care, you want to have the automation put into it, but you don't necessarily want somebody putting their hands on it, right? Even, when somebody's delivering meals, Uber Eats, Postmates, whatever, right? There's still, some interaction. You're sharing the same airspace in the last 30 seconds, right? I mean, how do we make this so that isn't the case for the future when these things arise again? And to answer that question about Africa, we did recently sign a partnership in Africa. We are developing opportunities in Africa right now. We're looking at expanding a lot of that. Africa is a big region for a lot of this technology. A lot of the use cases right now, are very completely disconnected, no infrastructure whatsoever, and companies like Zipline do a great operation at servicing them with their parachuting in, the medications. When you get to more suburban, urban, even rural environments, right, it's going to make sense to have some shorter range drones, and that's really where we start coming into play. And so we're really looking at how does this evolve into not only rural areas, right? The Midwest, as you described it, Chloe, that's where I am. I mean, there's, a couple of big areas like Chicago and a whole lot of very, very disconnected areas. We partnered with Iowa State University, and that is a very spread out state. How do you make sure that those people aren't having that burden of having to go to the doctor? And then that's a big part of their day, right? If you have a job, that's a whole other thing, right? Now it's be sick or have work, right? These shouldn't be choices people are making in their lives, right? So how do we remove the barriers for all this to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, you brought up something that touches on one of our listener questions here. So they're asking about what you're doing and how you would distinguish it from what Amazon is doing, and specifically their upcoming plans for last mile delivery. Are you working with Amazon, or can you talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing that's similar or different than their plans for the last mile delivery?
So if you saw last week, recently Amazon announced that they are not going to be pursuing a lot of their own R&D and last mile delivery. They kind of ceded that the market and the ecosystem approach is probably going to be a better opportunity than trying to do it all in one, right? So Amazon is no longer pursuing that, Amazon controls everything approach and are looking to partner. We are not currently partnered with Amazon. We have several other partners who have different relationships and may or may not be, so we don't see them necessarily as the juggernauts in the room these days. What we're really building is the last mile infrastructure, so mailboxes, window mounted units, like locker and community stations for drones, and so we create this universal infrastructure point, right? Just like your mailbox now. You don't really care if it's USPS or if it's Amazon or if it's FedEx. It all goes into one mailbox. You don't have a separate one for each of these companies, right? And one of the big things that we're seeing is you don't necessarily want Amazon controlling your mailbox at home and deciding if Uber Eats didn't pay more than Postmates and now they're not delivering to your mailbox, right? So we see it being very important to be a neutral third party, especially when you're dealing with the U.S. Postal Service and different things like that, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing our part of building that piece of the infrastructure extremely well, but we've partnered with a number of other drone companies, right? So whether it's a company working with a pharmaceutical delivery network or somebody who's delivering food or somebody who's delivering packages by drone, our landing stations work with all of them, right? They can accept packages and send packages back. So that's really how we look to be in the future of this, really that automated security between both traditional and automated and drone deliveries.
We're getting lots of questions, Ryan, about your product, and you brought up the mailbox structure. Would you mind hitting one of them quickly? So the question from Thomas is, in more northern climates, how does the system deal with snow? Is there a solar-based heating element to keep the platform free from snow buildup? Can you talk a little bit about the hardware in the mailbox and specifically how it deals with weather conditions like that?
Sure. So actually something that will be released very soon. We actually have a top curtain system that's part of our new centering mechanism on the top of our drone delivery station. So when it's closed, when the drone's not coming in, that centering system will actually create a grid over top of the system, and that will be covered by a curtain, right? So any leaves or debris or snow that's accumulating on top of there will accumulate on top of those curtains, right? Once the drone comes within about 100 feet, it lets the delivery station know, hey, I'm incoming, this is the right package, right drone, all the authentication takes place. Once that authentication is verified, the top centering system actually opens, right? And so the curtains retract with that top centering system, and off the side goes all the snow and water and leaves that have accumulated. So you actually have a fresh landing pad exposed every single time, and you don't have to worry about sun bleaching out the April tag or QR code or the beacon in any way. And so it exposes the landing station. Once the drone comes in and lands on it, that centering mechanism actually corrects and orients the drone over the elevator every single time. You never have to worry about the precision landing being off by any step in some way. Package is released into the box, we put it into the right locker system, notification gets sent to the recipient and the deliverer saying you have a successful delivery, here's exactly the chain of custody so you can get it insured, both the contents and the delivery itself. But then a notification sent to the delivery or to the recipient so they can come and retrieve it at their convenience. We are working on getting temperature control built in there so we can have cold chains so we can work on things like, for instance, the upcoming vaccine.
So whenever I'm moderating a panel with, especially when I'm speaking with seasoned and successful founders like yourselves, I always like to talk about the topic of failure. So it's easy to talk about our successes. We tend to spend a lot of our time talking about how everything's going great in our lives, with our companies, with our products, and so forth. But I tend to find that we learn much more from our failures. So I guess the question is if either of you would be brave enough to speak a little bit as to maybe a mini failure or something that you tried out specifically, if you have something this past year, but if not, maybe earlier in your company's history, what's something you tried out that did not work out, and what did you learn from that? Any volunteers?
I mean, I'll go if you don't want to, Chloe.
I've got.
Why don't we start with Ryan? Chloe, I'm calling on you next.
Do it.
We've been working on this since 2013, and while drones are the hot topic now, they definitely haven't always been. And when you don't have a track record in aviation or tech, right, like I didn't, and I mean, I was going into people's offices and no joke, getting laughed out of it. This is 50 years away. This will never happen. You're crazy. You're crazy. Just why would you throw your life savings into this? Right? And you want me my money? I mean, if you don't have thick skin, it doesn't really matter what happens. It could be a bad product development that you overcommitted to financially. It could be a partner that ends up being a bit more of an enemy and you showed them a little too much, right? I mean, it could be any number of things that could be considered a setback, right? If you don't have the thick skin and the perseverance to get through it, I mean, any number of those people have said grit is really what determines your success. I mean, 2020 couldn't be more of a testament to that, but that's really the name of the game, is just figuring out how do I get over the next obstacle and just get to tomorrow.
Yeah, that's truly such a great answer. And I can tell you from experience, especially at the beginning of when Roman first launched, that we also faced a lot of challenges and failures internally just to really see how our teams can scale and grow, right? And those, I just really want to point out, those are actually super healthy. It's healthy to have failures, it's healthy to have challenges, and frankly, to learn from them. I mean, that's why you have project retros, you have team retros. It's there to point out, like, not just the failures, but what can you do to learn from it and what can you do to do better. So a lot of it, our first learning lesson that I always fall back on is like really understanding how you take innovation and risks. I think a lot of people think of innovation as just invention, right? Like creating some newfangled product, which is simply not true. What innovation really is having like a very deep understanding of a user's need and forming the right circumstances with the right resources to take action on improving those needs, to form an empathy and really have a shared common understanding with the org, the team of what you're trying to do. And for Row, it was really finding that mission. And there's a lot of hits and misses in order to find that mission that's just beyond what we originally launched with, which is erectile dysfunction. So it's really understanding like how can we address healthcare holistically, right? And you have to take a lot of risks to get there. And the sort of internal risks another internal risk that I can think of is, moving from a very monolithic team as we're, rapidly growing from a team of 5 to a team of 300 plus people into microservices and a service-oriented architecture that is truly, truly hard. And only very recently, I would say that we've become even more successful at understanding how we can structure our team so that we can scale for the near future. We found a way to work in squads, which is often made up of 6 to 8 people of all sorts of different stakeholders, from like engineering, product design, data, whatever subject matter expertise, and we work together in a very diverse and small group for a reason. A lot of it is to bring everyone along for the ride. Versus siloing everyone and working in a monolithic group so that everyone can test together, everyone can develop together, and everyone can take risks together. So the sort of life lessons, I guess, that we learned were largely like internally. How do you define yourself? How do you have like a evergreen mission for everyone to strive for? And how do you build a team that can really, really scale?
One of our listeners is bringing up the topic of data and privacy. Obviously in healthcare and logistics, data is having an increasing role, and there's a ever-growing list of security concerns and privacy issues that are implicated by the data that you're gathering from your users. Chloe, would you mind talking a little bit about how you collect data and what your company does to use that data and protect that data and consumer privacy? And then I'll ask the same question of you, Ryan.
Absolutely. Sure. That's such a timely question and also a very important question. If whoever had asked this question, thank you. Firstly, you might have heard of CCPA if you're a California resident. Essentially, like, how do you actually collect information, protect information, etc. I just really want to fall back onto the fact that from the very first day, like we really see the company in a way that is really meant to help patients with their healthcare needs. It's not really redesigning consumer goods in any sort of way. So the fact that we're working in healthcare, we have to abide by all sorts of laws, which includes like how do we collect information in the most kosher of ways and also store information in the best ways possible. So as of right now, we collect information for your healthcare purposes. We need to know the same amount of information as a doctor would need to know when you go into a doctor's visit to fill out that same sheet that you do at a PCP or a specialist. We need that information for our physicians, and our physicians see that information. Only our physicians see that information. Pharmacists see whatever is relevant to them in order to fill the drugs that they need to fill and provide that shipment information to you. So everything is stored in a very secure system, in a very secure database, and we only share what we absolutely need to for the right end users.
Ryan?
Sure. So we recently brought on our advisor, Dr. Lyle Berkowitz, to help us integrate with telehealth for that exact reason. I'm kind of a staunch believer in individual privacy, and as somewhat of an idealist, I like to think, what would I want in my products, right? It kind of makes me sick, some of the things that we have to give up just to be part of modern society and have a job these days, right? So we don't necessarily want to take the same line as what's been established in a lot of tech companies in the past. We do collect some data as far as, how do we optimize route planning? How do we take into account individual drone deliveries or traditional deliveries to, deconflict airspace and or ground space, any weather, that comes from sensors within the box and things like that. But we try to retain as little customer information as possible when it comes to especially anything medical related, to be HIPAA and GDPR and all the other ones, PIPTA compliant, right? We want to make sure that we don't compromise ourselves by being in a position to storing that data, right? Then we have to protect that data, right? So in a lot of cases, we just don't want to touch it, and we want to partner with telehealth companies like Ro that act more as the steward for that information, so it's not in more places than it has to be, which inherently becomes more risky in itself. So a lot of the stuff we focus on is how do we optimize a fleet, right? If I know a specific amount of deliveries are going to the neighborhood on the west, and we know the demographics of that neighborhood tends to be younger and they get more meals delivered at night, right? Or I have an elderly community on the east, right? And they tend to get more regularly scheduled medications and just online deliveries. We can best optimize a fleet for that radius to provide as much care as possible and make sure that as many drones are servicing those customers, so you can keep that delivery time as low as possible for the telehealth companies, right? So we really focus more on the logistics end of it and less on the individual privacy concerns of it in that regard. That makes sense.
I think we're coming up on the last 10 minutes of our presentation here. A couple other topics I wanted to tuck in quickly, one of which is your team and your culture. So both of you are really on the cutting edge of tech and innovation. Could you each talk a little bit about how you've created that team, that culture, how you basically create a team and a culture that supports innovation and risk taking? Maybe I'll ask Chloe to start and then over to Ryan.
This is one of my most favorite questions. It's totally my jam. I love talking about building a team all day, every day. And a lot of it is giving them the space to be creative and to take risks. We at Row, we actually invest back into people so that they can really explore and have a safe space just to actually innovate. A couple of things I can think of on top of my mind, we have book clubs and like subsidized educational expenses, lunch and learns, mentorship programs, rotational residencies, hackathons. We even have our very own program to have people dog food, the sort of services that we have, as long as it's appropriate and that they're eligible. So they use Row's healthcare services and find ways to provide feedback to the right teams and say like, hey, you know, like, I feel like you can really do a little bit of work over here to make it just a little bit more magical for our patients, our end users. And actually, we hosted our very first virtual hackathon recently. And you know what? The great thing about hackathons is that it's designed to not only build technology, but you know, also build camaraderie and cohesion amongst your colleagues. It's creating that, again, open and encouraging atmosphere to drive people and teams to think differently about problems and solutions and technology, and giving people the space to tap into the passions, think creatively, and again, take risks. So a lot of the way that we build teams is, you know, that sort of extra mile, that bit of magic that we really want to infuse, which is how do we get people to go beyond their day-to-day work and think beyond the mission and just really, really take it on and you know, put in just a little bit of that magic into that day-to-day work. So.
Awesome. Same question to you, Ryan.
You know, we really like to take a broad perspective on things, and we think that comes from people with different backgrounds and different experiences. So, you know, we've got a number of veterans, we've got people that attended different types of colleges, people from around the world. You know, we're about half men and women, right? You know, every kind of background you can imagine, and we believe in very much in radical transparency. There's not a whole lot of secretive anything in our company. The newest employee knows as much as upper management about where we're going with the company, what the strategy is, what we're working on, what the customer wants, and really what we're looking to achieve, right? And so everybody sees their role, why it's important, and why it's part of the bigger picture. That just kind of keeps everybody not only honest, but it keeps everybody, you know, living up to carrying their weight, right? They know everybody will see it right away, right?
I love, yeah. We also value radical transparency on our side too, so I totally vibe with that. It's, I'm sure you've read it from Netflix's book around, you know, candor and culture, and you know, just being able to, you know, have everyone see everything laid out in front of you, right? And really understanding where the company is sitting at and having that sort of shared understanding of the mission and that empathy. It really allows people to do more than themselves when you tell them exactly what's going on. So yeah, and the fact that you guys have such a diverse team that's also equally incredible and super hard to build. We too also value that sort of diverse culture and continuously build and find diverse perspectives, people that are, you know, very mission driven. So yeah, I totally vibe with everything you just said there.
Thank you, Chloe. Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear you guys do that. I mean, I think it's critical, right? I mean, when I was in the military, you know, everybody in a team overseas, you know, you knew everything about the other guy. You knew what they smelled like in the dark, right? I mean, it's that level of understanding, and everybody knows what everybody else is working on. You're not questioning the guy to the left and right of you, and an idea, whether it comes from an intern or from me, it's a valid idea.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
It keeps a very family vibe. People don't mind working those late hours or weekends when we got to get a deadline done because we're in it together.
Yeah. It reminds me of Stanley General Stanley McChrystal. He has like this theory of team of teams, you know, the idea of like having that sort of understanding across the teams and that transparency. It really strives people in both in the context for him in the Army, but also even beyond in the, you know, other parts of your world that you're operating in, to move together as one large team, despite the fact that you are in different factions and different teams all at the same time. And a lot of it, you know, that underlining is really just transparency and understanding of that sort of general mission. That's how you really get people to work beyond, even if you have to work late hours to, you know, solve a bug or really push a product through.
Stan McChrystal was my boss's boss when I was in, so
Incredible.
familiar
Huge fan.
yeah, incredible human being, just an incredible human being.
Yes.
So as we're wrapping up the hour, I want to give you both an opportunity to give a last parting shot to our audience here, but just one quick question before that. 2020 tends to come along with a lot of doom and gloom conversations. To end on a high note here, could you each tell us one thing that you're excited about? Chloe, why don't we start with you? What's one thing you're excited about going forward, leaving this year behind us?
Goodness me. Firstly, I'm just excited by the amount of work that the teams at Row have done. The rap sheet is just truly incredible. And all I can think about is not just the amazing work, but even the amazing partnerships that we've had. Like very quickly, like externally, we've recently partnered with Ribbon Health to find patients, to help patients find like local in-network, in-person providers. We've also partnered with Pfizer Greenstone to help manufacture like the highest quality generic medications. Those partnerships are super incredible, and the sort of work that people are doing, the partnerships that we're forming even internally, like we've actually hired so many talented individuals. So I know this is just like really like the rap sheet and capstone of 2020, but in all honesty, I believe it's truly a lens into the future. We get to have these incredible partnerships that we get to deepen our relationships with, and have incredible people joining, you know, Row to really help further our mission in building a patient-centric healthcare ecosystem, and being patients' first call. So that's just a wonderful thing, honestly.
All right, 1 minute left, Ryan, over to you, and then we'll do a quick parting shot. What are you excited about?
I'm excited to build a partnership with Row, I hope. Hoping a lot of the things that have 2020, the silver linings, right? People reprioritizing their work-life balance, people reprioritizing their commutes, people kind of understanding that if we can automate some of these things, we can not only be safer, but spend more time with, you know, the things that are important. I hope a lot of those, and that's kind of what I'm really excited for.
Thanks.
All right, in our last 2 minutes here before I turn it back to Emma for our closing remarks, Chloe, any last parting shot you want to leave our audience with?
If we're doing takeaways, I've got a couple.
Please,
you know,
please, yes.
Yeah. Well, the first and foremost of takeaways, and hopefully this is applicable for anyone in any industry, is find your vertical moat. For us in healthcare, it was, you know, defining ways to reinvent what it really means end-to-end healthcare experience for our patients. Find that vertical moat and really invest in it. You know, own every single part of your business, and you'll find that sort of freedom to make the calls that you want. And the second sort of takeaway is going back to General Stanley McChrystal and what we were talking about earlier with the team of teams. Really invest in your teams. You want to make sure that they are absolutely flexible and autonomous. And the ways of doing that is A, giving them the space to really take risks, investing back into those spaces, and also B, making sure that they're multidisciplinary, making sure that they're small, making sure that they're super flexible. So when you're moving, regardless, location agnostic, remote, non-remote, in the office, even if your roadmaps are changing, even if things are foggy in front of you, at least you can really count on your teams to strive towards a similar shared understanding of the mission.
Ryan, any final parting shot or takeaway you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Chloe, that was amazing. I would echo all of that. I'm just, you know, super humbled to be on a panel with you, and I appreciate you guys having me, and thank you for the audience for tuning in. So I just really want to say thank you to everybody.
Amen. Thank you so much, both Chloe and Ryan, for joining, Tech in Motion for putting this on. Emma, I'll turn it over to you to wrap it up, but thank you so much for letting us participate today.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. That was such a valuable conversation. I just loved all the collaboration and all of the wonderful insight you guys had to contribute. I took a lot away from this, and I'm sure that everyone who attended took a lot away from this as well. So thank you guys so much. So for everyone who is still here in attendance, we hope that you can join us for part 2 of this series about building strong tech teams and getting your biggest questions answered. So this event will be coming in January. It'll be an Ask Me Anything style event, similar to what we just did right now, where we got to field all those awesome questions you guys have. But we'll be meeting with some really great award-winning tech leaders, and they'll be sharing their best advice for upskilling, hiring, engaging tech talent heading into 2021. So you won't want to miss that. Stay tuned for part 2. And then also one more cool opportunity we have coming up. For those of you who are interested in cybersecurity and networking engineering marketplace, our sponsor company, Motion Recruitment Partners, is hosting a virtual booth next week at the Next Gen Live conference December 11th through 12th. So we'll put a link to register in the chat if you guys are interested in that. But that's all from us today. Thank you all again for participating, for speaking, and thank you everyone for attending and making this event an amazing success. And we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Much.
Thanks. Take care.